Good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Brett Baer. It is payday for federal workers, but for about 800,000 of them, there is nothing new tonight to pay bills or buy food or put gas in the car. It is the first missed paycheck in the 3-week-long partial government shutdown. And it shines a new light on the impasse between a president demanding a border wall and congressional Democrats who refuse to give it to him. Once again tonight, there is the growing prospect President Trump will declare a national emergency to get the construction money flowing. But he appeared to put the brakes on that this afternoon, at least for now. We have Fox team coverage. Mike Emanuel's on Capitol Hill, where Congress is gone and hundreds of thousands of people are demanding some kind of action. We start off, as we often do, on the North Lawn of the White House with Chief White House Correspondent John Roberts with the latest on this back and forth. Good evening, John.
Brett, good evening to you. President Trump kept up the pressure on Democrats today, hosting a roundtable here at the White House on border security. The question is, which pressure is greater? The president's argument about having to preserve national security, or the pressure that's coming up, the mounting pressure from hundreds of thousands of federal workers who are working without pay?
I'd rather not do it because this is something that Congress should easily do.
At a roundtable on border security today, President Trump said again he is holding off on declaring a national emergency, that he'd rather work with Congress, though he won't wait forever.
If at some point they just can't do it, this is a 15-minute meeting. If they can't do it, I will declare a national emergency.
The president insists the Republican Party is united on his demands for border security, but some cracks appearing today on the issue of an emergency declaration. In an interview, Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley saying, "I don't think he should do that. I think it's a bad precedent, and it contravenes the power of the purse that comes from the elected representatives of the people." But Senator Lindsey Graham, who met with President Trump today, tweeted, "Mr. President, declare a national emergency now. Build a wall now." If he does declare a national emergency, President Trump will need cash already appropriated to build the wall. Among the funds he's eyeing, $14 billion in a 2018 emergency appropriation that included money for hurricane relief in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico's Governor Ricardo Rossello reacting on Twitter today, "Mr. President, don't tear down U.S. citizens in order to build a wall. Help the USA rebuild." While President Trump insists he 100% has the authority to declare an emergency and build a border wall, he does expect a legal challenge.
What will happen? I'll be sued. It'll be brought to the Ninth Circuit.
With federal workers missing their first paychecks because of the partial shutdown today, President Trump took steps to mitigate the impact on federal workers, promising to sign legislation to guarantee back pay.
Stop the shutdown when? Today! When? Today!
But at least one group of federal employees isn't waiting. Air traffic controllers filed a lawsuit today, claiming that forcing them to work without compensation is a violation of the Constitution. In an effort to entice Democrats to the table, President Trump is subtly shifting his language, saying he would be open to a broader agreement that could include immigration-related items that Democrats have made a priority if they'll fund his wall.
If they came to me with a package beyond the barrier, and if it was something that we all agreed with, that the senators agreed with, that everybody liked, it's common sense. Most of this is common sense. I'm all for it.
So far, no indication from Democrats that they are willing to take the president up on that offer. The president will spend the weekend working the phones, talking with Republican members of Congress, but so far there's nothing to indicate that there is anything that even begins to look like a light at the end of the shutdown tunnel. And the president will take a little bit of a detour on Monday. He's inviting the champion Clemson Tigers to the White House for a celebration before taking off for New Orleans. Brett?
John Roberts, live on the North Lawn. John, thanks.
President Trump's been on a tear against the media over the past 24 hours, labeling them the opposition party after their coverage of yesterday's meeting with Democrats. It all started with a late-night Twitter storm. Quote, "The mainstream media has never been more dishonest than it is now. NBC and MSNBC are going crazy. They report stories purposely the exact opposite of the facts. They're truly the opposition party working with the Dems. May even be worse than fake news CNN, if that is possible." Then, as he's leaving for the border, Trump said this.
The media, which I call the opposition party, a lot of the media, in coordination with the Democrats. They're not talking about the Democrats folding.
You walked out on the Democrats. Are you going to bring them back? How can you get a deal if you're not talking?
Well, I didn't pound on tables. I didn't raise my voice. That was a lie. I very calmly said, if you're not going to give us strong borders, bye-bye, and I left. I didn't rant. I didn't rave like you reported. I very calmly walked out of the room. I didn't smash the table. I should have, but I didn't smash the table. And that's the story.
And while the media continues to try to trap Trump in a lie, CNN's Jim Acosta botched this attempted takedown of the president.
Here are some of the steel slats that the president's been talking about right here. As you can see, yes, you can see through these slats to the other side of the U.S.-Mexico border. But as we're walking along here, we're not seeing any kind of imminent danger. There are no migrants trying to rush toward this fence here in the McAllen, Texas area. As a matter of fact, there are some other businesses behind me along this highway. There's a gas station, Burger King, and so on. But no sign of the national emergency that the president has been talking about. As a matter of fact, it's pretty tranquil down here.
Pretty tranquil because walls work, Jim. I think you just made the president's point for him. Greg,
that was paid for by the Donald Trump 2020 re-election campaign.
Wow.
I mean, he's at a spot at a wall and says, see, there's no problem here. He may be dumber than we initially thought, which says a lot. Or I'm thinking this could be a really long prank. Like, you know, Andy Kaufman, when Andy Kaufman pretended to be this character all the way till his death. I think that he is playing this role. And by the way, it's amazing. Look, the media has no credibility on this issue because just weeks ago, they called this a humanitarian crisis, right? There were people rushing the border. There were caravans. There were people dying. They're suffering. And then when Donald Trump agrees and says this is a humanitarian crisis, they turn into this mocking tone. What crisis?
It's manufactured.
There's no crisis here. Look at this wall. I mean, they are the biggest hypocrites. It is hard not to despise. It's hard to like them. It's easy to despise them.
The problem is that Obama called this a humanitarian crisis. Trump tweeted that out, and the media is on record so many times as having defended him and so many times as having come in to defend Chuck Schumer and all those Democrats that voted for border security, that now they're panicked about how they can flip that now to hate Trump for espousing the very same things that all those Democrats did that the media backed them up on. That's their problem.
I don't get that at all. But
they are. They absolutely are.
So the media, you have all of them gathered down there to look at the photo op here, and you have the Border Patrol, and they make an announcement that 90% of the traffic comes in this sector where there's no barrier, okay? Only 6% of the traffic comes where there is a barrier. You'd think the media would take an expert opinion like this and maybe write it down in one of their news stories and show, hey, the experts on the ground say walls work.
No, that's how you distort numbers.
Juan, I didn't distort the number. This is what the guy said.
Here's the reality. There's not a wall across most of the border, Jesse.
I understand that,
Okay.
Juan. They have
by the way, I didn't
wall
understand
in a very specific sector.
I think
it really slows down traffic.
Okay, let me just say, the media went down there. The president himself, and I think a lot of the anger at the media came from the session with anchors that was supposed to be off the record. New York Times reports the president said he didn't want to give the speech on Tuesday night. He didn't want to go to the board, didn't see the purpose, and then pointed at the people behind him, Kellyanne Conway, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, Bill Shine, and said, these people think it's a good idea. Apparently he didn't. But here's the reality. You have a situation now.
So they violated the off the record.
Also, then, if you know what? I thought this was the most transparent president ever. Have it on the record,
You
Mr.
guys certainly
President.
mind read enough.
Oh,
it seems
my
like
God.
you know exactly what he's thinking at every time.
No,
he
but if
didn't
he
want to
says
go. Who
Wait,
cares?
Hey, all right, so he
cares?
didn't. So then he retweets. What's he retweet? He doesn't retweet the media. He retweets Brad Pascal, Don Bongino, Charlie Kirk. It's like he's in the conservative echo chamber.
Okay, yeah, okay. So Trump is active on social media. Thank you, Juan. Dana.
Yes.
So you have these off-the-record things, and then you go down there for this opportunity to showcase the border. The media is following along. Do you think this is going to make any impact with the press whatsoever?
Well, one, the thing about the off-the-record being violated, I I don't think it was that egregious necessarily. I would not like it if it happened to me, but I also would not be surprised if there weren't other people who were calling Maggie Haberman, the New York Times reporter, and telling her that exact same thing. Because we know this is what happens. The White House will say, that's not true, and then 3 months later you find out, oh, that is exactly what happened. On the fact that the media, how did we find out today that the Democrats have cracks in their coalition? I read that in a Politico piece today because the reporters are out there doing their jobs. It's like, it's not all fake news. Like, some of the reporting has actually been pretty good. The other thing, though, that bothered me is that the other day on The Daily, the New York Times podcast, they turned this crisis thing into, the headline was, it's a crisis of his own making. Right? Because they said he changed the asylum rules and how you apply for asylum, so that's why all these people flooded the border. But that doesn't, if you go back to, as Jedediah was saying, in the Obama administration, remember when that was a humanitarian crisis, they didn't say that was Obama's own making. Right. And so that is a frustrating thing because there's clearly a bias there or an unwillingness to look back and do a fair comparison.
Also, the Mexican drug cartels and all the drug trafficking and what's going on in Mexico is also not that's not Trump's fault. He needs to broaden this discussion. People don't like the term wall. He needs to talk about, yes, he needs to talk about barriers, but he also needs to talk about going after these cartels. He needs to talk about problems he has with the State Department that wants diplomacy all the time and doesn't prioritize going after these cartels. And he needs to talk about the humanitarian crisis that Democrats have been making that case for years, and the media backed them up. That needs to be the priority, not just the fence.
All right.